Good evening, ladies. Welcome back to another episode of Jenny's Self-Care Lab on Mindful Mondays. So today we're actually talking about a very interesting topic, at least one that I found to be very interesting, but one that I think you'll find interesting as well. And we're talking about all things vitamin A. Now, before you switch off and decide, there surely can't be anything interesting about vitamin A. I need. Why am I still here? Well, I beg to differ. Vitamin A is such an important ingredient that we're going to be discussing today. And if you are anybody who has had issues with acne, fine line, wrinkles, sagging skin, or you are somebody who is having issues with any of those things today, right now, then you want to stick around and listen to the rest of this video. So we're going to be talking about all things vitamin A. And for most of us, we casually know vitamin A as retinol or retinal. Now, casually, that is what it's known as. And yes, of course, those are also very much valid names for vitamin A. However, there is a lot more to this baby girl, and we're about to unpack her. We're about to unpack her, and I found quite a few of these facts very interesting as I researched, particularly was researching the difference between retinol and retinal, because I have seen that a couple of times. I think I was first introduced to retinol back in the day when I was struggling with acne. And then when I came to South Korea, I was introduced to retinol because I had found it in a product in the store. And I was like, oh, like, did they misspell this? And then I realized, no, 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 they didn't misspell it. There is retinol and there is retinal. And I was curious about what the difference is and how do I decide which one to get for myself, right? Like, what are the characteristics of a retinol versus a retinol, so that when I'm going shopping and I'm thinking about, okay, I want some sort of retinoid for my skin, how do I decide which one is the best one for me? So let's unpack it and better understand that together, because there's actually a lot more than just those two. So first and foremost, I'm gonna have to read my notes for the names because I don't want to get them wrong. But vitamin A is present in skincare products in several forms. Okay, now I was actually very surprised to find out that there's over 2,000 siblings, cousins, I don't know who else, aunties maybe and uncles in this family of retinoids. However, we're going to be talking specifically about the most common ones in skincare, particularly facial skincare. I know some of them double down for like body care as well, but I'm specifically focusing on facial skincare. And we're going to talk about the 7 most popular ones that we typically hear about or that are typically used in skincare products. And these include retinol with an O. It includes tretinoin. It includes retinaldehyde. So that's the one that I had seen in the store. It doesn't, on the pack, it wasn't retinaldehyde, it was retinal. However, if you read ingredients at the back of the package, it will say retinaldehyde. And then there's retinal palmitate, retinol acetate, adapalene, and then hydroxypinacolone retinoid. Retinoid. Okay. It's a tongue twister. Okay, but there's thousands more where that came from is the surprising thing that I did find out. But we're going to talk about these 7 and I'm going to unpack each of them because that was a lot and it was a mouthful. And to be honest, a lot of these names are the kinds where I think most packets will either say retinoid, retinol, or retinal. But I think if you're reading the ingredients behind your product, these are some of the names that you might come across. I've definitely heard of adapalene. I'm not sure where I heard of it from, but let's unpack and maybe it will start to make sense. Okay. In the medical community and in the science community, I believe they will refer to these mostly as, so this collective of ingredients, they will refer to them as retinoids. So either retinoids or vitamin A. And we're going to break them down one by one. And we're going to start with the one that is most common, which is retinol. Retinol. Excuse my pronunciation. I'm going to have to get it right. So we're going to start with the one that is most common, which is retinol. Retinol, we are all very familiar with. For example, I've brought 2 of my own products here that I use. So this is the Ordinary. This is the retinol that I've been using for months now. Well, I don't use it as often as I should. I probably should, but this is the ordinary retinol, 0.5% with squalane. There's a couple of other retinols that you can choose from the ordinary. In fact, I find their page as it relates specifically to retinol to be quite interesting and helpful because they actually show you kind of like a table or diagram of sorts that shows what color the retinols are at different stages of call it concentration and the percentages. So for example, I think this is actually the first one, the lowest one, and then you get like a second. I think there's about 5 levels that they have, and it shows how the color changes, how the thickness of the formulation changes as well, and so what you can expect in a bottle. But then it also shares who should be using which one. So like it will share this is for beginners. This is why I had bought this one because it was my first time buying it for myself, right? Like in a skincare product, typically because I had been on acne, anything I was taking at the time was prescription. So anyway, so there's that one. And then there's another example of this is a Korean brand, a South Korean brand. So this is Retinol Intense by Som by Me. Um, Some by me, some by me. The interesting thing here actually is that they've got retinol, retinal, and bakuchiol. So bakuchiol is like a natural derivative of retinoids, of the retinoid family, if you will, and it is an alternative that is very popular in South Korea, because it's natural, and so typically with Korean skincare, they prefer to go natural rather than like the typical very harsh active ingredients. And so, yeah, so this is quite an interesting brand because they've got very low percentages of each one, but nonetheless, quite a concentrated one or quite an interesting one, if you will. So anyway, those are two examples. So let's start with the most common of the seven, that is retinol. So retinol, you're probably going to find in a lot of the products that you're using. It doesn't require prescription. So because it's typically used in a lot of cosmetics, you're not necessarily going to go and get this one on prescription or anything to that effect. If you look behind, if you're looking for any kind of retinoid that is like on the shelf and readily available for customers to buy, and you look behind, it will probably be retinol that you're buying. It is, however, I learned to be highly unstable. So when you're talking about ingredients, I've learned that there is a level of stability to different kinds of ingredients. So the ingredients, when you research them, it will say whether or not this is a stable ingredient. And stable versus unstable could mean something as simple as like, it oxidizes very easily, or when it comes into contact with oxygen, it changes its structure very easily. And so, yeah, um, although retinol is very much popular, I think one of the reasons why is also because like you'll see that they use very little retinol in a lot of things. So like 0 point something percent. I think the highest I've seen is maybe 5%, if I'm not wrong. I think that might be the one that I saw from the ordinary, but typically very, very, very little percentages. And yeah, so it is very unstable and it has a high likelihood of irritation. So although it is used most common in a lot of common skincare products, it does have a high likelihood of irritating your skin. And that is why they always suggest that you start with the lowest dosage possible of retinol and then get used to it and work your way up, because it does have a track record of being very irritating to the skin. And so if you're someone with sensitive skin like me, that is why I opted for something, one that had something hydrating in it. So squalane being a very hydrating ingredient, but also something with a very low amount of retinol so that I wasn't starting out with something that was too strong. And this, I've been very lucky. My skin didn't break out. But then again, I also use it very sparingly. I don't use it every day, even though I can. And I also make sure that when I am using it, I don't layer it with other stuff. Now, there are things you can layer with retinol. However, I personally prefer that if I'm going to be using a product for the first time, especially a product that can be irritating to the skin, then I try not to layer it with a ton of things unnecessarily, especially when I'm still starting out. So very high likelihood of irritation. Then it is very interesting because it is being used in a lot of products. It is less effective than other retinoids, such as retinol and tretinoin. So tretinoin is probably out of the seven that I've researched the most effective or the strongest in terms of formulation and strength, but we'll get to that just now. But retinol is actually less effective than other retinoids. And that is because of it's less potent and therefore it takes much longer or much slower. It's much slower to get to action, right? So to get doing what it's supposed to be doing. But again, because it has that unstableness and it can irritate your skin, you do not want to be like, oh, I want it faster. So I'm just going to, get one that's like 100%. No, no. Okay. Like little is best in this case because yeah, it is quite an interesting, it's less potent, less effective than other retinoids, but at the same time, the likelihood of irritation is high. And in fact, the likelihood of irritation with retinoids in general is high. And that is why tretinoin being a stronger version of any retinoid, or at least of the ones that we're going to be talking about today, that is why you can only get it on prescription because it can irritate your skin to the point of it not being good. So you do more harm than good at the end of the day. Okay, retinol is still a very good ingredient for beginners. So if you're going to be using it or you're thinking about using a form of retinoid, a form of vitamin A, retinol is a good option to go for. Try and go for something very low percentage, low concentration, and just be very careful as well as you use it that you're not overdoing it and just take it easy. Watch out for any irritation that occurs in your skin, redness, itchiness, stinging, that kind of situation. It is because it's less stronger than like your tretinoins and your retinols. It is best suited for people with sensitive skin, with dry skin, and just like somebody who's still new to the use of retinoids. Some of the benefits that you can find, which they kind of, in some ways, are consistent across the different retinoids, but there are some differences. So benefits as it relates to retinol is it does help with the fine lines, the wrinkles, child. It also helps with acne. So this is why a lot of people would be using retinol and would be familiar with it. It does also help promote collagen in your skin and cell turnover, which is something that's very important for you to constantly be getting new skin and making sure that your skin is healthy and doing away with any of the dead parts of your skin, or your skin cells rather. So yeah, it is a really good product. So please don't not go buy retinol because now you're like, it's unstable. There's a reason why it's being used in a lot of skincare products, and that's because I think at the low dosages that they're using, it is a very good product and ingredient to help with those issues, anti-aging concerns as well as acne. So let's chat tretinoin because I I've also heard similar to adapalene, I've heard of tretinoin here and there, and I've also seen the social media posts where people are like, "Oh, you can get tretinoin cream," and I see, especially in the US, I see this a lot, or at least people posting from the US. I see them talking a lot about tretinoin, so I'm so glad that we're actually able to touch on it today. So tretinoin, you can only get over the counter with a prescription, meaning that you probably have gone to see a dermatologist and they've carefully analyzed the situation and said, okay, I think I can give you this much. I understand though from my previous use of medication for acne that like something like a tretinoin would be given to you at a very low dosage, especially in the beginning, like super low dosages, and then they would monitor you and only if the doctor is happy to give you a little bit more, they would. So it is a vitamin A and it's known as vitamin A acid. That is mainly because it works much quicker and is more effective than a retinol. It is much stronger. Although that is the case, tretinoin has a lot of there's caution around it in that I read a study done by one of the institutions in the US, and they were talking about how some of the the side effects from using tretinoin and stuff like that. So there's a reason why there's so much caution around it, and you can only get it with prescription, and typically you need to see a doctor for that to be the case. It does have good benefits, very similar to retinol, anti-aging concerns, very good. It will give you much more visible results much quicker than a retinol would. It will also assist with pigmentation spots, which is something that's not necessarily highlighted with retinol. Retinol really good with anti-aging and also good with acne, but retinoin is not only good with acne care and anti-aging concerns, but also very good with hyperpigmentation spots and just making the skin feel a little bit more and feel and appear a little bit more supple. Um, Probably because it's assisting a lot more faster with that skin cell turnover that we spoke about. So yeah, that is tretinoin. That is tretinoin. Let's talk about retinaldehyde. Retinaldehyde is the one that I had seen when I came to South Korea that said retinal, and I was like, whoa, there's an A there. It's supposed to be an O. Somebody call this company, tell them they misspelled it. No, they didn't. Retinaldehyde is an intermediate form of vitamin A. So the retinaldehyde is a little bit more stronger and more effective than retinol. And part of the reason why it is much stronger is that this was actually an interesting thing to learn that also makes sense is like when you have an ingredient that has to be converted multiple times by the skin to work, it is less effective. And so what you want is an ingredient that doesn't require as much effort, one, and two, as many conversions in order for it to actually do what it needs to do. And so the nice thing with retinol is it actually is one step closer to tretinoin or retinoic acid. So in terms of how effective it is a little bit more effective than your retinol. This, though, with retinaldehyde, you want to definitely make sure that you're somebody who's been using retinol for a while or tretinoids for a while. You're much more familiar with it. This is for people with oily skin, like very oily skin, acne prone skin. And I'm not talking like just, you got a pimple here and there every once in a while because of your hormones or something else. This is like people who are really struggling with acne, have really oily skin, or they're much more matured. They've got much more matured skin, i.e., really deep lines and wrinkles and that kind of stuff. But again, even if you are much older, it is much better to start off with a retinol, which is good for beginners and kind of like take your skin through that journey. Retinol can be found in some of the common skincare products, but you will notice that it is not as common as retinol is because most brands and manufacturers will kind of stay away from it a little bit. Also because where you have a stronger ingredient, the likelihood of irritation also increases. If you are somebody with sensitive skin, you want to maybe stay clear of retinaldehyde. Stay with kind of more like your retinols and get used to that and use that. Okay, so that is retinaldehyde, stronger than retinol, closer to tretinoin, much stronger, much more effective. However, definitely not for dry skin people or for sensitive skin people, again, because retinoids typically will dry out your skin. So if you've got dry skin, it's going to make your skin even more dry, which then will lead to more oil creation and pimples and acne breakouts and ugh. So if you're a beginner, if you've got dry skin, if you've got sensitive skin, stick to retinol. If you have super oily skin, super acne prone skin, then perhaps you can try retinol. Again, or I would actually suggest that if you're somebody who has acne prone skin to the point of like you're truly struggling with acne, like then you just should go see a dermatologist because then the dermatologist will decide what it is they need to give you. Do they give you a tretinoin? Do they give you a retinaldehyde? Do they give you something topical? Do they give you something like a contraceptive? Like what exactly should they be giving you? Because if it is hormonal, they might opt for a different medication rather than perhaps a retinoid in some cases. But yeah. The fourth one was retinol palmitate. Retinol palmitate. Now, poor thing, Retinol palmitates, I actually low-key had to like go and look for more on this because in all of the papers I had open, they kind of had like one line, one sentence about retinol palmitate. I was like, guys, don't forget about the last born. It's considered the least effective of vitamin A, the least effective form of vitamin A. Now, one of the reasons, which is why I was bringing this up earlier, is that retinal palmitate requires a conversion of 3x. 3x conversion in order for it to do within the skin what it needs to do. So, like I said previously, if something needs to be converted multiple times, the more times it needs to be converted, the less efficient it becomes, the less effective it is. And so, retinol palmitate is the least effective form of vitamin A. It is quite stable though, right? Which kind of makes sense because the more stable an ingredient is, there is a high likelihood also that like it's kind of like me what it needs to do, what it needs to do. And it's always the unstable ingredients, the ones that are like shaking up the house that will leave your skin feeling all kinds of good, but then sana, there might be some other side effects that you were never ready for. So quite interesting. But it is quite stable and it acts as a skin normalizer. And that was pretty much out of the things I read about it, the very few things I read about it, those were the two things that I was like, okay, like interesting enough. I'll take these. Okay, so that is all I have on retinol palmitate, but it's good enough to know that it's the least effective, requires conversion, and at least it gave us the conversion piece, right? Because now we understand with any ingredient, conversion multiple times within the skin is just not, it's not doing what it needs to do unless that is how it's supposed to work. Retinol acetate, that is the fifth one. Retinol acetate is, I called it the awkward child in the family. And this is because it is basically a derivative of vitamin A, and it is the combination of retinol and acetic acid. It has apparently a very mild odor, yellowish color to its substance. And it's an active ingredient that is often used for oral and skincare issues. However, it wasn't necessarily recommended as the go-to ingredient. I think I've seen it in one or two products, but not too much. But yeah, that's retinol acetate, awkward child in the family. Nobody's talking about them. Yeah, tis what it is. All right. Adapalene is number 6. So adapalene, as I said, I've seen or heard about it a few times. I think it has also been spoken about along with tretinoin on a lot of like TikToks and social media reels. It has been FDA approved for treating acne. Now, the interesting thing with adapalene is that it actually treats a number of different things. Some of them like had big names like skin conditions that I maybe some of them didn't even know about. But two that stood out was melasma as well as alopecia alopecia areata, which is those two I think we hear about quite often, melasma as well as alopecia. Um, Adapalene apparently is a third generation retinoid, and it was created to improve the side effects of a tretinoin. So as I said, tretinoin is actually pretty strong. There's a reason why like you can only get it with prescription. And so because there's a number, it is an effective ingredient, i.e. retinoids are effective ingredients in general. However, because they tend to be much stronger, and some of the ones that aren't even mentioned or used in skincare products, it's because as effective as they could be, the irritation kind of it works away the magic that would happen with the ingredient anyway. So the irritation you would get on your skin. And in fact, the study that I read spoke very in depth about the irritation caused by some of the other stronger retinoids that exist. Adapalene was created as a third generation retinoid to try and curb, along with another, there's like two other third generation retinoids, but it was created to try and curb or minimize the side effects of tretinoin. Now, it is perceived as the least effective. And I don't think it's for the same reasons as the retinol palmitate, which basically needs multiple times to convert. The adapalene is perceived to be the least effective for acne, not necessarily of the retinoids, but it is perceived to be the least effective for acne. However, it is the most tolerated for acne. So what that means, or at least how I understood that, is that, it may not be the best one if you have acne for a dermatologist to say, yep, use this, this is going to help you. However, what dermatologists are finding and what studies are finding is that in terms of how we as patients are receiving these retinoids, if given it to us, is that adapalene is the most well tolerated by our skin, which should also tell us something, right? In that, what I read in between the lines there is that like less is more when it comes to retinoids, because yes, adapalene might not be that strong. And I know we're in a culture where people want things to happen overnight. It's like I used a product today and tomorrow I wake up and I'm just, all my concerns are over. And so everybody's shopping for whatever we'll say, like 10%, 15%. But you have got to be so careful because your skin, yes, the ingredient might be good to help with a particular issue, and the higher the better. But our skin has a life of its own and it changes over time. And so we have to be very careful that we're not making our own skin issues more worse by trying to get the highest, most concentrated form of a particular ingredient. And so adapalene is an interesting one, perceived as the least effective for acne, but is the most tolerated for acne. And so what that might mean is that if you're on adapalene, it might mean your progress is perhaps a little slower because it is maybe not as strong as a tretinoin. However, a tretinoin could take you 10 steps back because it will irritate your skin and has other side effects that you might be dealing with. In that case, the conclusion then from the paper that I was reading, which is actually a very good institution, it's one of the biggest health institutions in the world, the conclusion was that adapalene is actually the best for acne vulgaris, which is your common acne, basically. So that was interesting. And then the last one sounds like pina colada. That's the only thing I remember when I see this name, hydroxypinacolone retinoid. So this is basically the new kid on the block. It's a derivative of vitamin A, and it's supposed to apparently help with aging and hyperpigmentation. And as you can see, some retinoids help with hyperpigmentation, some others not so much. Others very much are for acne mainly. Others are for, anti-aging as well. So yeah, the retinoids are an interesting family. They all give us something different, or at least like are different in some way, shape, or form. Retinol seems to be, in conclusion from everything I've read, retinol seems to be our go-to gal. So continue using your retinols. If you're a beginner, if you have sensitive skin, if you have dry skin, be very careful. Start with the lowest dosage possible and then work your way up as time goes on. If you are somebody who likes things and then you go and try the high concentrated thing and something occurs with your skin that looks weird, please stop using that product immediately. It is such an important thing. Don't just be like, it means it's working. No, no, stop it. Take that thing off, wash your face, stop using it immediately because you might be doing more harm to your skin than not. And again, I continue to say, if you're somebody that has very bad acne, please don't go shop for your own products and be like, oh yes, I'm acne prone. Let me just go to one of these stores online and buy something under the acne prone skin part. Don't do that. Make sure that you are going to see a dermatologist if you can, hopefully, and you can afford it. You go to see a dermatologist, ask them for an assessment. They will then tell you what to be using, and they'll assess the kind of acne that you have, because acne comes out as a result of many different things. So make sure you also catch our hormonal series, because for the ladies, our hormones shall be busy, okay? And there are going to be times when our body is going through some very natural processes where certain hormones are fluctuating and we might get a few breakouts. That does not require you to now go and buy tretinoin, okay? Or to go and find a script somewhere so that someone can write tretinoin on it. And then now you're like using tretinoin, please. There's a difference between the people who truly are struggling with like super hectic acne versus your occasional acne breakout, which could be a result of many things: how hormones, hygiene, the food you're eating, your lifestyle, you're smoking or not smoking, you're drinking or you're not drinking. Like there could be a number of things at play. And so I hope that is helpful. Those were your seven wondrous retinoids out of the many thousands that exist, but those were the most common. And please pop your questions into the comment box below. Like, share, subscribe, and make sure that you sign up for our newsletter. And we'll catch you next week on Mindful Monday. 안녕.